Welcome to this edition of the Quantum Experience. Thrilled today to be joined by Jonathon Riddell. Jonathon is the CEO of Kothar Computing. Jonathon, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Matthew. So as Matthew said, my name is Jonathon Riddell. I'm the CEO of Kothar Computing. A little bit about my background is I have a PhD in quantum many-body physics from McMaster University, which is in Ontario, in Canada, with an affiliation to the Perimeter Institute. And I'm basically an expert in scientific computing and high-performance computing in a quantum context.
Great. Could you maybe give us a sort of a brief overview of the work that you've been doing over the last sort of 10 years or however long it's been?
So over the last 10 years, I did my PhD, in the 20, so in the last 10 years is a long window, eh? Yeah, so
Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you there. I threw you there.
I finished my PhD, I think, in around 2022. The focus of my PhD topic and my master's degree topic was focusing on modeling strongly correlated quantum materials in a variety of contexts, finding their ground states, learning about their properties, looking at novel phases of matter, and of course, dealing with the ever difficult computational challenge of it's really difficult to model quantum things classically, and this is why we need the quantum industry and why we want to build quantum computers. While I was doing my PhD, I guess an interesting thing to note is that I started my YouTube channel. A common theme in my life has always been, I think, I think most things can be a lot easier than they actually are. So at the time, it was, getting people involved in advanced topics in quantum many-body physics. If you're watching this, you might have seen me on YouTube explaining things, targeted at not trying to get the biggest audience in the world,
Yeah.
but targeting, senior undergraduate students, junior graduate students that needed to, get quickly involved or wanted to get quickly involved in new topics that they might be interested in research. So that's what that was all about. And then I did a brief stint in the UK where I spent time at the University of Nottingham and the University of Birmingham, sort of going away from quantum sort of materials and thinking about like magnetic systems, electronic systems, and sort of novel phases of matter. I moved more in the direction of um, studying dynamics, but through the lens kind of similar to quantum computing in the sense that we just focused on quantum dynamics generated by things that look like the things that you would be able to run on quantum computers. And I was there for about 2.5 years, and then about a year ago, a little over a year ago now, I started Kothar to kind of basically our motto is we're rebooting scientific computing. So scientific computing in today's ecosystem is really based off of technologies that were sort of seeded in the 80s and 90s, like you're talking about MATLAB, Mathematica, Python, and I just had this sort of deep desire to make things easier and better for people. And to do that, when you really look at the stack, I came out with kind of a very ambitious plan that to really fix a lot of the problems and the tech debt that we as a community, from basically the broad high performance computing community to all the way down into the quantum community, have accumulated. The way that you fix that is you start from scratch and take advantage of more modern tools that were developed in the last 5-10 years to build things like compilers. And so like the catch is we're building something that's as easy as Python, but it doesn't have a lot of the issues of Python. It makes expressing the problems you care about, very simple. And along with that, we're also building a platform to make most of your scientific workflows a lot easier. So there's a lot of folks in the community that have access to, for example, GPUs provided through their university or local cluster, and they just don't use them because it's really difficult to use them. And we want to fix that problem. We want to basically level up the whole community in scientific computing.
It feels like frustration is the mother of all invention. That's what that sounds like to me. So before we move on to Kothar, I just want to go back to your YouTube channel. So I was aware of your YouTube channel a few months ago, and I recently went back to have a look, sort of in preparation for this call, actually. There's a few things that I really like. It's a fantastic channel, by the way, and I would implore everyone to go and have a look. It's just Jonathon Riddell, right? That's the YouTube
Yeah.
channel. Yeah. Something I really like is the community that's been built in the comments as well. People are, it seems like they're genuinely interested and asking very insightful questions. I would like to point out one comment that I read about an
Okay.
hour ago, and it's on the what even is statistical mechanics. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this. It just says, "Thanks, Chris Pratt,"
Yes,
which
yes.
I found really funny. Uh, I mean, you
Yeah,
should take that
there's
as a compliment, by the way.
I do. There's actually a joke video on my channel that just so this is a really common when I was posting my videos on Reddit. I started this during COVID. So at that time, like the community on Reddit was super active, and that's how I got my initial audience. So I posted
Yeah.
it there, tons of Chris Pratt references there, and same
Oh,
on
right.
YouTube. So
Okay.
there's it's a recurring theme, and so there's a YouTube video on my channel that just goes through like at the time of making all of the Chris Pratt comments that I had, and then it just it uses one of those softwares that like shows you how to transform one person's photo into another person's
Yeah,
photo, and it's just
yeah,
me. It just goes back and forth between me and Chris Pratt.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the top comment, and I thought, what have I stumbled upon here? But yeah, it's good to hear the backstory. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so let's go on to Kothar Computing. So maybe give us you've given us sort of the background, but t tell us what the sort of status quo is, what's happening at the moment.
Yeah, so Kothar was founded a little bit over a year ago, and I
Yeah,
just want to say, just to make sure the pitch is as clean as possible.
yeah, sure.
We're trying to build the next generation of scientific computing. Like we're trying to build the next generation scientific computing ecosystem, right? So we want to make access to things like advanced methods, classical accelerators like GPUs, and eventually, why am I on a quantum podcast? We want to make getting people involved in quantum computing, specifically, the trend of the community is going towards this hybrid space. So you want to be able to easily program GPUs and quantum computers kind of like basically in the same ecosystem, maybe even on the same compute node, depending on what the hardware providers give us access to. And we want to do this in a way that's as seamless as possible. So there's two ways that you could think about building a company like Kothar. You could build it for the high performance computing community, and you would just want to basically hand this off to people that look a little bit more like computer scientists. That's not what Kothar is doing. Kothar is doing this in a way where we're building for scientists. So we're trying to make the barrier of entry as low as possible. We're trying to make this language as expressive as possible to lift off, a bunch of different burdens for folks. And we're also trying to do this in a way where we don't give you pre-cooked recipes. So something that you can fall into as a designer is accidentally sort of saying, this is the algorithm. I hand this person the algorithm, and if the work that they want to do falls exactly into these tight constraints, then you can do it this way. We want to sort of give you a playground to innovate and drive research, so it's easy to express, take pieces apart, put them back together in different orders. We're really focused on making a platform for innovation. Um, and just so that you can picture what we're doing in your mind, we're doing this in two ways. The first way is that we have something called Kothar's Workshop, which is like an application. You log into it on your web browser, and you basically hook up all your compute to it. So you have and this is, by the way, Matthew asked for this the status quo. This is live. The beta
Okay.
is live. If you want to use this, we already have, a little over 70 users. The beta started about a month ago, and it seems actually quite usable. People are doing real research on it already. So check us out. Send me a DM or whatever you want, and we can talk about getting you added to the beta. But basically, it's basically a front end to compute. Hook up your cluster, hook up your laptop, hook up your workstation, get access to cloud compute in a way where you don't really have to worry about, is my version of NumPy up to date, or Do I have this driver installed? Do I have that driver installed? We handle all of that for you. All you have to do is hook your compute up to the workshop, and it will handle like all of that for you. And so the second more ambitious thing, I mean, they're both equally ambitious, is our programming language Aleph. This is also up. It's working. It has a lot of unique and really cool things to it. Um, and the idea there is that, again, I'll say it again, it's as simple as Python, but has a few key strategic advantages for sort of the long-term vision of scientific computing. Um, and it's developing quite rapidly. You can use it now. People are solving problems with it today. Um, like a kind of cool thing for the HPC community, and we'll open this up to people eventually, is that it's really designed to be very integratable with C++. It's basically very similar to Python in terms of how you'd accomplish that, but it basically serves as a front end for high performance computing, and the language itself is going to get faster and faster as we add features to it. So the status quo is that the platform is really designed for people today in the condensed matter physics community, in the material science community. We have so as I said, about 70 users online, and you can do things like mix a lot of different classical methods together. Today, you can't use quantum computers, but we've started talking about it internal to the company. We think early 2026, you'll be able to use quantum computers and classical computers together in the same ecosystem. So it's developing really fast, and I think it's developing in a way where, speed can sometimes be like at your detriment, but we're not sort of seeing that with our speed so far. Like, I think it's a very useful platform that people should check out.
Great, thank you very much. So, could you maybe tell us a little bit about your sort of first leadership position, sorry, how it came about, and how it went?
So the first one.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing there is that there's sort of a lot of times where you find yourself in a leadership position where you might not fully appreciate that you are in one. So I'm going to give you three answers.
Okay, great.
The first big one was I was the president of the Undergraduate Society of Applied Mathematics in my undergraduate school, which was Western University. At the time of my life in that period, I mean, this was a huge milestone for me. I had a budget, I could spend money, I had ideas. And I collected a group of, folks that I didn't really know, but I had heard about them into like, a little governing body. I went and, begged the department for more money. We ended up organizing like a really big regional conference for undergraduate students, which is at the time wasn't widely available for the communities that we were looking at. So the stakes and the challenges of the time were big there. It's kind of it was sort of the first taste of taking very talented and motivated people, trying to supply them with as much motivation as you can give to give them, and then executing on something that none of us had ever done before, but we had to have a coherent vision to sort of execute on. The next leadership position that I think most academics find themselves in eventually would be the first time that I was a supervisor or the most senior physicist on a project. Yeah. And so all of a sudden you go from a place where you sort of have the safety of someone more senior than you to kind of have the final say of, this project is finished, or, we've sufficiently investigated this or that. So the stakes are really different compared to running an undergraduate society with, $5,000 to spend. It's you're really responsible to ensure that also what you're doing is like worthwhile. You want to, the people working under you are trusting you in a lot of cases to say this question is actually interesting, right? And people are going to care about this if we answer this question. And you want to give, and an interesting thing there as well is that you want to give junior physicists the space to grow and learn. So you're transitioning from a space where other people are giving you the space to grow and learn. And so you don't want to jump on, every question that you come up with as a group with these more junior folks. even if you could do things faster, you have to resist the urge. To be a good leader in that context is to resist the urge to solve their problems for them, because like at the end of the day, when you're a PhD student, you're there to learn and really grind through the things that you need to figure out. And so you need that space from your mentors. Um, but I think the one that is probably the most interesting thing to the audience um, would be starting out as the CTO of Kothar. So the challenge is, in some sense, a merger of the two, right? But with a much bigger budget.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So you're building a coherent strategy for technology, a roadmap, and figuring out who to hire for those roles. And so the stakes are much bigger here, but in a sense, they're kind of a combination of the both. You have a budget, you have something you want to accomplish, and you need to hire people to accomplish them. Uh, but you're also, in general, we hired a lot of most of our staff have PhDs. Some of them are, part-time and working with us while they complete their PhD, but it's essentially the same problem where you're supervising a group of people that have their own career goals and they have their own growth goals, and it's yeah. So you need to decide things like relatively big questions like should we do this problem or build this feature from scratch, or should we start with another piece of technology. So you're asking questions like does building from scratch justify the advantages you get, so much so that you could sink 6 months of your time into it rather than spending a week integrating something that is not exactly what you want, but you can get it in a week, right? So these big decisions, you're constantly making them, and you need to make them, sometimes without enough information to know if they're fully um, good decisions. Like it can take a bit over a year to get to a point um, where a feature is mature enough to know if what you've built is, providing enough value to users, and justified the time that you put into it. Um, so these are sort of the early these are sort of the three looks at leadership I've had in my life,
yeah.
the first looks of that, and I really got into all of them because the CTO role is because the company was my idea. It was based off of my technical vision, and so there's nothing else that you can really you have to be in that position.
Yeah. Okay, so along those three steps that you've made there, are there any sort of big mistakes that you've made that was a learning experience for you?
Yes, but I think that it might surprise a few folks. I think the biggest mistake I made, and the mistake I see other scientists turn founders, like a decision they're very tempted by, is shying away from the business side
Yeah,
of your company. And so this is a really key leadership role that people have to take on. So like at the end of the day, the technical founder is positioned to be the best salesperson on the company, and is very uniquely positioned to drive vision, not just on the technical side, but also on the types of relationships and monetization paths that your company can actually take. And so a company a company is most optimal in for a bunch of reasons when you embrace things like division of labor. And so my advice isn't to say to technical founders like turn yourself into like business development 24/7, all of these things. But my advice is to make sure you're very assertively like at the decision making table, because at the beginning I kind of shied away from this, and I think that this is just something that most folks will regret if they do. It's really it's your vision at the end of the day if you're the technical founder, and you should be at the table during all of these key decisions. Um, and you shouldn't take that side of the business lightly, even if it's a side of the business that you don't want to be deeply involved in, you should at the very least be a part of all of the important conversations.
Great. I mean, I'd probably encourage most for some positions it's not appropriate, but I would probably encourage most people to get a bit savvy on the business side, because after all, that's sort of
I
the bottom
I
line, isn't it? You know?
I 100% agree. And I
Yeah.
think, after working with a few, very talented engineers, I have to say the best engineers are the people that can combine the technical vision with the business needs
Yeah.
and vice versa. Like this is a necessary skill that you have to build up. The quantum industry is very interesting because it's filled with a lot of extremely experienced physicists that have never really thought about business until the opportunity kind of arises.
Yeah.
And so we have like an emerging culture here, and a lot of people learning, what that culture should look like for the benefit of the businesses that they're growing and the wider community. But it'll be interesting to see how this takes shape.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I totally agree. Um, so I just want to move on to our next question. So as the CEO of a company with that's very technical, it's it's technical heavy in terms of the staff. So and I would assume that a company like Kothar, it's ever changing.
Yeah.
So how do you foster a culture of innovation while maintaining the sort of core uh, tasks that are at hand for a company like Kothar?
Yeah, it's a super interesting question that we've talked internally a lot about. So yeah, keeping people motivated and on task is a super interesting question, especially because a lot of the folks that you're going to hire are going to be coming from a scientific background where um, the tasks aren't as focused because most things that you're doing are much more exploratory and long term. So the quantum industry is super young, and it's really informed by that culture. It's basically it's fascinating to see a business culture that's like just a morphed version of the academic culture that I came in, because it's kind of strange. You go from country to country. Things are different, but if you walk into a physics department, it's basically the same everywhere. Like this is the
Yeah.
at least in my experience. And so for us, the idea was pretty simple in how we approach that. So when you're getting people with PhDs or people motivated enough to get a PhD, and then you keep whatever standards you want to keep, we settled on everyone that we're going to add is going to be very strong and can probably own a portion of a project for the most part. So we settled on a individual contributor model, and we have more or less like a flat structure at Kothar. So we hired people into their areas of expertise, and basically the way it works is we have our high performance computing expert, and when there's a group discussion and there's something about performance, we either say, okay, this person is the person to trust in this conversation, or let's just go measure this thing. And we have like a very collaborative conversation about everything that we're doing. And I guess the way that it works is that I basically end up having last say. If we can't decide as a team on what to do, that's kind of the way it works. But I think a key portion of the hiring process when you do a flat structure like this is that it needs to be pretty clear that the technical person you're adding buys in to the vision and thinks that what you're building is worthwhile. So because we're solving a pain point that every one of our scientists came up through, and they came, different scientists come to different conclusions. The people that we hire, they came to a very specific conclusion during their PhD, and that was I have to basically learn computer science to do the job that my supervisor is giving me. And so those are the types of people that we hire. They've been through all the pains that we want to solve. So that buy-in hasn't been super difficult for us. But what the flat structure kind of does is individual people are brought on for individual expertise. Most people understand sort of like a broad 5-year vision. We break down where the priorities are for them. And then based off of the project, we also bring in, we call them champions. We have the primary champion is the person working on the code for that specific project. Secondary champions come in to basically say, okay, so you're going to need a little bit of support with someone with a high performance computing background or maybe a more computer science background. We give them the support that they need based off of other expertise, like on our team. And I think very, very talented people, they come with very strong opinions, but if they're mostly aligned, the group discussions can be extremely productive for teams, and it makes people, you know, not just feel like it, but know that they are involved in informing the vision of what they're building, and that's really important to people like that.
Cool. In terms of my next question, we actually touched upon this slightly in the last question, but some of the people that may be promoted into a leadership position for the first time, they may not have experience interviewing people. So, are there any particular traits that you look for when you're interviewing outside of what you just mentioned? And what are maybe some of the questions that you would ask to get you closer to that information?
Yeah, this is a good yeah. So another thing that we've discovered basically from scratch for ourselves as we've grown is so I'll start by saying that technical interviews are different from business oriented interviews. Like as a technical founder, you're going to have to hire people on both sides of the spectrum, especially when you're small. You're going to be a big portion of that of those decisions. So for technical interviews, I would say one of the things that was the most important was culture fit. It's easy as an expert to have a deep dive conversation with another expert to understand you know if you look at their publication history, for example, there's four names on that paper. Like, let's see what they actually contributed to these types of things. So, from technical to technical, I think most people will walk away with a pretty good understanding, especially because they've been interviewed in those contexts themselves. What they should be. What they should be focusing on and what they want their candidates to know. And so the thing that I would say is like focus on culture and how that sort of fits into everything because people are going to be locked in a room. I mean, we're a remote company. We're not locked in a room with each other, but people are going to have to work with each other closely for a long period of time. Culture is not something that you should sleep on. It is something that you should take extremely seriously because if people are unhappy, they're going to leave or they're just not going to work as hard as you would hope. And so that's something I would stress that you should focus on. For business oriented folks, the disclaimer here is that I'm a little bit early on in the journey of adding people like this to Kothar, but all of these say the questions that I've landed on and why I've landed on them. And so the way that I think about that is I want to get to the heart of what's going to motivate them to push me towards making specific decisions or choose to go down specific paths. So a one that I like that I reuse is tell me about a situation where you pushed a prior company to go in a specific direction and it succeeded, and have them walk you through, how they chose that specific initiative, why they thought it would succeed, and then also ask them to go into, people can't go into all the details, but ask them, did it succeed because of the reasons you thought it would, right? The answers to these types of things, and you can flip it back and say, tell me about something where you pushed for it and it didn't succeed. And why didn't it succeed? And this question gets them to a point um, where they can both show humility and also demonstrate a thought process to you, and why they might make decisions and why they might push you to make decisions. So strong individuals will be able to articulate why they're making decisions and why they are confident about them. And if you're an academic turned founder and you haven't gone down this path yet, I think what you'll find is that they'll remind you a lot of people with that are doing their PhD or that they have their PhD. People find ways to become rigorous thinkers in a lot of different contexts, and a lot of people will impress you in that context. And I think that that's what you're basically looking for, right? You're looking for someone that is going to walk you through why they think the way that they do and why they want to accomplish what they want to accomplish, and communicate that to you in a way that you understand and you can appreciate. And a last one that I'll say, and this is basically going back into the culture one, is especially at Kothar, we have a lot of open discussions where there's 4, 6, 8 people, like all stakeholders, especially when projects like intersect. This is a core theme at Kothar where we're trying to make things, if you try to make 4 different paradigms talk to each other, different stakeholders are going to have different requests for a feature. And so a really important one that I always ask is, how do people deal with their ego? How do they get ego out of the conversation? What's their internal monologue like? And how do they separate ego from decisions and disagreements? I feel like basically every human has been a young person who has had to go through the process of unwinding that part of themselves. And people who have legitimately worked on this and matured they tend to actually have nice answers to this question.
Yeah.
And it kind of reveals a little bit about them and how your dynamic would work with them. Also, it's like if they're very cagey about it, if they don't give you a good answer, I mean, maybe that's a red flag as well. But in my experience, most people actually gracefully answer this. And there's good answers like, well, sometimes I need to walk away and I'll come back in a day and it'll all be fine. Or, typically I don't put my emotions into these types of conversations. And I'm eager to learn if there's a better path. But yeah, it's a good culture fit check.
Yeah, I like it. I want to ask you about your most memorable or impactful leader that you've worked under, and why. Well, it
Yeah.
could be a few.
So yeah, I would, just like a few of the other questions, I'm not going to give you an immediate straight single answer. So I would struggle to name the best leader. But what I can do first is I can basically tell you what I think from a technical to technical person, like what makes a good leader. Like how do you lead, deeply technical and talented people? And I think the common trend of all the good leaders that I've had the pleasure of working with is that leadership feels more like collaboration. And it really only exists to make sure that you're focused and aligned with the goals of whatever project that you're on, and leadership that can lend a hand when it's needed and basically removes roadblocks. Leadership that's not a blocker, basically. And there's also something to be said about leadership that cares about your growth and giving you space to challenge yourself. You know, especially in the quantum industry or in academia, we're all on marathons. These aren't sprints. There's deeply technical challenges that need to be solved. So giving people the time and space to grow in Kothar is, and in all of these other companies, should be a huge priority for people. But I've actually had the pleasure of working with 3 academic supervisors in my day. And I think all of them basically hold up to these tenets in different ways. So I'll name 3 people just so I can say that I named 3 people. So one would be Marcus Mueller. He was who I worked with in my undergrad thesis. And he really exposed me to quantum many-body physics and got me passionate about that. I moved on to work with Eric Sorensen at McMaster University. Extremely good computational physicist. Really gave me the time and space to push myself in those areas and really cared about my growth. It was more about growth than it was about outcomes, but the outcomes were good. And then finally, Bruno Bertini, who's currently at Birmingham. So he's the person I moved from Nottingham to Birmingham with. Him as well, giving you space to ask very challenging questions and lending you support when you can. or sorry, when you needed it. All three of them held up these tenets in different ways. I know folks like not everyone has as good of an experience as I do, but I guess I'll take this brief time here to also say that during the interview process, you're not just being interviewed, you are interviewing the people that you are working, that you want to work with.
Absolutely.
So getting the chance to ask them questions about their leadership style is something that you should absolutely be asking about, and you should be talking to members, like people that actually work for them. Those are conversations that you want to have um, as well. And so, yeah, those three folks each played a critical role in my development, and all three contributed to the way I see leadership and mentorship.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, that concludes this episode. What I would say is it's no wonder that your YouTube is doing very well. You're clearly a natural at this, Jonathan. So thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
sparing up some time for us. I know it's a busy time for Kothar, and yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting again and to read more about the work that you're doing. And yeah, all the best with the beta as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Matthew, and I look forward to chatting in the future.
Cool. See you in the next one.